Hey guys, tonight we're standing beneath the shadow of Cairo's golden domes in the last winter of the Mamluk Empire, the year 1517. The streets smell of cardamom and gunpowder, of rosewater and fear. Somewhere nearby, a muezzin calls the dawn prayer from a cracked minaret, his voice trembling against the cold wind sweeping off the Nile. In the courtyards below, armoured horses stamp restlessly beside marble fountains, their riders whispering about the Turks, those relentless soldiers from the north who have already swallowed half the world. You pull your cloak tighter and look toward the citadel rising over the city. That's where the last Sultan of Egypt, Tumen Bey II, paces the terrace, staring into a storm he cannot stop. You can feel the tension in the air like static. Cairo is still magnificent, its palaces glittering with glass lamps, its mosques towering like ships of stone. But something beneath the beauty is cracking. The Mamluk Sultanate, once the powerhouse of the Islamic world, is rotting from within. For 2.5 centuries its warrior slaves ruled Egypt with skill and ferocity, defending Islam against Crusaders and Mongols alike. They built this city into a miracle of marble and mathematics, but glory ages like anything else. The soldiers are now bureaucrats, the generals merchants. Greed has replaced discipline. The Nile floods less generously. The treasuries echo with emptiness. Even the mosques, their tiles chipped and faded, seem to whisper, "It's ending." You wander through the streets and hear the rumours that everyone repeats, that the Ottomans are unstoppable, that their cannons can tear through walls like paper, that their soldiers pray before battle and kill without mercy. "They took Syria in a week," says a spice seller, eyes wide. "Even Damascus bowed." And whoever thought Damascus would bow? The people laugh nervously, then cross themselves with silent prayers. Cairo, after all, has always been the heart of the world. How could it fall? Yet deep down you can feel it. The fear that maybe this time even the heart can bleed. Far to the north, in his capital of Constantinople, Sultan Selim I, the Turks call him Yavuz, the Grim, is already sharpening his empire like a blade. You can almost see him there, a stern man with dark, piercing eyes, a Quran on one side and a scimitar on the other. He has defeated the mighty Safavids of Persia and crushed the Mamluk army once already in Syria. Now he looks toward Egypt, that last glittering jewel still outside his grasp. For Selim, this isn't just conquest, it's destiny. There cannot be two suns in one sky, he tells his generals. The caliphate must be whole. And the only thing standing in his way is this city, your city, with its worn-out soldiers and weary sultan. The contrast between the two worlds couldn't be sharper. In Cairo, the Mamluks still cling to their traditions. They wear silks embroidered with gold, their beards oiled and braided. They ride into parades with ostrich feathers waving from their helmets, as if the 15th century never ended. In the Ottoman camp, by contrast, the soldiers drill in silence, their cannons gleaming under the winter sun. Order versus ornament. Fire versus elegance. You already know which one wins in the modern world. But for now, Cairo pretends not to see the truth. The coffee houses buzz with gossip. The scholars debate theology in Al-Azhar. The markets thrum with colour and noise. Yet even amid the laughter, you can hear the hoofbeats. Faint, distant, inevitable. Every night riders arrive from the north with darker news. Aleppo has fallen. Damascus is gone. Gaza burns. The line of defence that once shielded Egypt is collapsing like sandcastles under a rising tide. Inside the citadel, Tumen Bey too tries to hold the pieces together. He's young, barely 30, chosen as sultan after his cousin was deposed for incompetence. He's brave, educated, and beloved by the people. But fate handed him a corpse of a kingdom. He orders new cannons, new alliances, new taxes, but nothing seems enough. The Mamluk emirs bicker among themselves, jealous and treacherous. "We are lions," one declares at council. "The Turks are jackals." Another laughs bitterly. "Lions grow old too, my friend." Tumen Bey listens in silence, then finally says, "Then we'll fight like lions anyway." Outside, the winter grows harsher. The Nile runs low, the markets close early, and the stars over Cairo feel cold and far away. But the city refuses to surrender its pride. From the minarets, the call to prayer still rings across the rooftops, steady as ever. Hayya ala al-falah, come to success. Even now it sounds like a promise the city can't keep. One evening, you walk to the mosque of Sultan Hassan, that grand echoing masterpiece of the old Mamluk age, The lamps flicker low, the floor smells of wax and dust. A preacher speaks softly from the pulpit. Empires rise, empires fall. But the deeds of the faithful endure. His voice trembles, but his eyes blaze. The crowd listens, silent, then murmurs Amin. For a brief moment even despair feels holy. And then, a trumpet blast from the northern gates. The first Ottoman scouts have crossed Sinai. The siege of Egypt has begun. Word spreads like lightning, the Turks are coming. In the citadel, Tuman Bey orders the gates sealed. Cairo will not fall easily, he says, though his face betrays the truth. He knows this will not be another battle of honour but the end of an era. You look out from the ramparts at dawn. The city stretches below like a living thing. Mosques, markets, the endless curve of the Nile gleaming pale in the mist. You feel pride and sorrow tangled together. This is Cairo, mother of scholars, bride of the world. And now she stands alone, watching her doom approach. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the drums of Selim's army echoing from the horizon. Low, steady, inevitable. The age of the Mamluks is dying, and the age of empire is coming. You wake to the sound of drums echoing across the desert. Not Cairo's soft rhythms of festival or prayer, but something harder, deeper. From the north, the Ottomans are coming, a storm made of steel and faith, and at its heart is one man, Sultan Selim I, the Grim. He's not called Yavuz for nothing. In Constantinople they whisper that he never smiles, that his gaze alone could freeze a river. Yet behind that sternness lies a mind sharper than any sword. You picture him now, seated in his tent beneath a red and black banner, studying a map lit by a single lamp. His hand rests on the hilt of his blade, his other tracing the route south. Aleppo, Damascus, Gaza, then Cairo. His general stands silent, afraid to breathe. Finally he says in a low voice, "The Mamluks once guarded the caliphate. Now they guard their pride. I will take both. Selim's ambition is immense, but it isn't greed that drives him. It's vision, or maybe obsession. He sees himself as the hand of divine order, chosen to unite Islam under one crown. To the Ottomans, the Mamluks are not just enemies, they're relics, clinging to chivalry while the world has moved on to cannons and bureaucracy. Selim has already humbled the Safavids of Persia, crushed their Shia armies at Chalderan, and marched unopposed through the Levant. Syria, once the Mamluks' proud buffer, now marches beneath his banner. The path to Egypt lies open. You imagine his army as it moves, endless lines of soldiers in mail and leather, the sun flashing off musket barrels. Drummers keep the rhythm. Banners of scarlet and gold ripple in the cold wind. The artillery rolls behind them, great bronze beasts drawn by teams of oxen. When they fire, the world shakes. No army in the Middle East can match this power. Not in discipline, not in faith, not in fear. Selim rides among them wrapped in a cloak of dark fur. His face is unreadable. He speaks little, prays often, and trusts no one. "I am not cruel," he once said. "I am precise." You've heard the stories. How he executed his own brothers to secure the throne. How he banished poets who questioned his wars. How he spent nights awake writing letters to generals who didn't live long enough to answer. His enemies call him the Butcher. His followers call him the Purifier. Both names fit. When Damascus fell to him months ago, he entered the Umayyad mosque in silence. The scholars of the city offered him the keys, expecting arrogance. Instead, he knelt and prayed until his forehead touched the marble floor. "God has returned his house to order," he said softly. The gesture won him the hearts of the faithful and terrified the proud. For Selim, conquest is never just conquest. It's a sermon delivered by cannon fire. Now his gaze turns south. Egypt, land of the Nile, heart of the old caliphate, the jewel of the Mamluks. His advisors urge caution. "The deserts of Sinai are cruel, Majesty," says one. "Our men will suffer. The Nile floods may trap us." Selim listens, then replies, "Then we will walk through fire and water both." And so they march. Across Syria's barren plains, through the ruins of Gaza still blackened by war. Every fortress that resists is razed. Every governor who hesitates is replaced by an Ottoman one. Villages fall silent as the army passes, dust rising like ghosts behind them. The people call it a moving city, a tide of men, weapons, and will. In Cairo, word of this juggernaut spreads faster than the wind. Inside the citadel, Sultan Tumen Bey listens grimly as messengers describe the losses. Our army at Gaza? Broken? Damascus? Gone. Reinforcements from the Maghreb? Still weeks away. The chamber falls silent. He dismisses everyone except his most loyal emir, Janberdi al-Ghazali. What would you have me do? Tumen Bey asks. Beg? Janberdi bows his head. Fight my sultan. Even lions die with teeth, Tumen Bey exhales, slow and heavy. Then let us roar loud enough for the heavens to remember. He orders new weapons forged, cannons cast in Cairo's forges, muskets bought from Venetian traders at any price. The city's craftsmen work day and night. The call to arms echoes from mosque to marketplace. You see boys too young for war-sharpening blades, old men mending armour older than themselves. The people of Cairo still believe, not in victory perhaps, but in dignity. And far away, in the endless desert between Gaza and the Nile, the Ottomans advance. The wind howls across the dunes, their banners snap like whips. The soldiers march by night to avoid the burning sun, guided by stars and ruthless discipline. When they reach the green edge of the delta, their generals breathe in the smell of the Nile, sweet, wet, alive. One of them murmurs, "The end of the Mamluks." Selim rides forward and stops beside the water. "No," he says quietly, "the beginning of empire." Back in Cairo, you stand on the city's edge and watch the horizon shimmer with heat and dust. Somewhere out there, the world's future is marching toward you. The mosque's minarets glint in the sun, proud and helpless. You hear a merchant mutter, "Maybe God is sending them to cleanse us." Another spits. Maybe God is testing them instead. But the truth is simpler. Power moves south, and history follows it. By the end of the week, the Ottomans reach Arish, the last Egyptian fortress before the delta. The Mamluk defenders fire their cannons once, twice, then break and run. Selim doesn't smile. He just gives a single order, march. The drums begin again. The ground shakes. The desert breathes. Cairo has one last season left before it learns what surrender feels like. The road through Syria and Palestine becomes a trail of silence, a map drawn in smoke and ash. Everywhere the Ottomans pass, the Mamluk banners vanish. Cities that once boasted of loyalty to Cairo now open their gates at the mere sight of Selim's red standard. The Sultan's army moves like a machine, disciplined, unbreakable, driven by divine certainty. By the winter of 1516, the road to Egypt lies open. You travel south with the army for a while, or at least it feels that way. The endless rhythm of hoofbeats, the metallic clatter of armour, the rumbling growl of cannon wheels. Every morning the muezzins call prayer across the ranks. Every night the soldiers sleep in perfect rows beneath a sky that seems too large for human plans. You look at them, janissaries, sipehis, gunners, engineers, and you realise this is not just an army. It's an idea. The Ottomans believe themselves chosen to reorder the world, and maybe that's why the world keeps yielding. Selim rides at the front always. He doesn't shout commands or deliver speeches, he doesn't need to. His presence alone disciplines men. He's leaner now, older, his beard flecked with grey, but his eyes burn as if lit from within. The soldiers whisper stories about him, that he prays every night before battle, that he hasn't slept more than 2 hours in years, that angels walk behind him in the smoke of cannon fire. You've seen enough to know legends start as facts twisted by awe. Behind him trail the Ottoman guns, monstrous things of bronze and iron, cast in Edirne and hauled across the desert by teams of oxen. The locals stare in fear. They've never seen such weapons. These are the cannons that crushed the walls of Constantinople, that thundered through Persia, that now wait to roar at Cairo. When one fires, the sand itself seems to tremble. The Mamluks, meanwhile, are learning the hard way that valour and tradition can't stop technology. Their strength lies in cavalry. Glittering squadrons of horsemen trained from childhood to wield sword and lance with deadly grace. Against crusaders, they were invincible. Against Ottoman gunpowder, they are ghosts galloping toward extinction. The first clash comes at Majdabik, near Aleppo, in August 1516. The two armies face each other across a wide plain, the morning air already hot, the smell of horses thick and sour. The Mamluk Sultan then, Kansu al-Ghauri, rides at the head of his host, jewelled armour gleaming, banners snapping in the wind. His army looks magnificent. Tens of thousands of horsemen, drums beating, trumpets wailing. Across the field the Ottomans wait, ranks of musketeers and artillerymen silent as stone. The Mamluks charge first, their cavalry sweeping forward like a tidal wave. Dust erupts, the earth shakes, and for a moment it feels like the old days might return. The glory of Ain Jalut, the victory against the Mongols. But then the Ottomans fire. You hear it, that impossible thunder, the roar of cannons rolling across the plain. Iron tears through flesh and armour, horses scream and fall. The Mamluk charge shatters against smoke and lead. Within an hour the field is chaos. Kansu al-Ghauri falls from his horse. Heart attack, arrow, divine will, no one knows, and the Mamluk army breaks. Thousands die, others flee south. By nightfall, the Ottoman banners rise over Aleppo. Selim enters the city not as a destroyer but as a judge. He orders no looting, no slaughter, only silence. In the Umayyad mosque he prays, then addresses the city's scholars. "We have not come for conquest," he says, "but for unity. God's house cannot stand divided." His words sound pious, but you can feel the iron beneath them. Unity in Selim's mouth means obedience. From there the road to Damascus is short. The city surrenders without a fight. Selim's army camps in its gardens. The soldiers marvel at its beauty. The minarets, the rivers, the orchards heavy with fruit. The people whisper that the Ottomans are not conquerors but reformers. Then they see the taxes, the conscriptions, the soldiers quartered in their homes, and they remember, every empire begins with promises. You walk through the Damascus markets and see the signs of change already. Turkish words on shop banners, Ottoman coins replacing the Mamluk dinar. A new order rising, quiet but total. The locals shrug. The Turks are harsh, one merchant says, but they keep the peace. By late autumn, the Ottomans are in Gaza, the last stronghold before Egypt. The Mamluks fight there again, briefly, bravely, hopelessly. Their cavalry rides like lightning, their banners flash red in the sun, but the guns end it in minutes. The survivors limp back toward Cairo, broken and silent. Selim stands on a hill overlooking the battlefield, the corpses of Mamluk nobles scattered like fallen idols below. His general, Sinan Pasha, asks, "What message for Cairo, my lord?" Selim replies without turning, "Tell them we are coming to pray." That night, the Ottoman camp glows with thousands of fires. The soldiers eat in silence. The muezzins call the evening prayer. Beyond the dunes, the faint glimmer of the Nile flickers like a promise. Egypt, ancient, proud, immortal Egypt, lies waiting. And in Cairo, the news arrives like a knife. Word of Marj Dabik spreads through the mosques and palaces. The people whisper, "The Turks have taken Damascus. The Sultan has fallen. The northern gates are gone." The scholars recite verses of patience. The soldiers polish their swords. The merchants begin hoarding grain. You stand again at the citadel walls looking north. Somewhere beyond those endless sands an army moves, not a horde, but a storm. Cairo, the mother of the world, is next. Cairo feels different now, quieter, tenser, as if the entire city is holding its breath. The markets still open, the muezzins still call, the scholars still teach in Al-Azhar, but beneath it all hums a pulse of fear. The old confidence of the Mamluk Empire has thinned into something brittle. Every rumour from the north hits like a stone. Damascus is lost. Gaza has fallen. The Ottomans are already in Sinai. The words echo through the alleyways like funeral bells. In the citadel, the last Mamluk Sultan, Tumen Bey II, stands before a window overlooking the city. The dawn light paints the minarets gold, but he doesn't see beauty anymore, only fragility. Behind him, his council of emirs argue, their jewelled hands waving, their voices sharp as blades. "We must attack before they cross the desert," says one. "No," another shouts. "We fortify Cairo and fight behind the walls." A third, older and tired, mutters, "We should send envoys, beg for peace." Tumen Bey turns and the room falls silent. He's not the man his enemies expected, not soft, not weak. His eyes are dark, alert, almost kind. There's something tragic about him. The kind of man who might have been great if history had given him better timing. "There will be no peace with Selim," he says quietly. "The man who killed his own father will not spare us." He walks to a map spread across the table, Egypt's outline traced in ink, the Nile a black vein running through its heart. He places his hand near Cairo. "This is not about power," he says. "It's about survival." If Egypt falls, who will stand between the Ottomans and the Hejaz, between their cannons and the Kaaba? The emirs exchange glances. No one speaks. They know he's right. Egypt isn't just a kingdom, it's a bridge between Africa and Asia, between old Islam and new empire, and now it's cracking beneath the weight of history. Tuman Bey had not been born a sultan. He was a commander, trained from childhood like all Mamluks, a slave raised in the art of war, freed only to serve. The Mamluks were a paradox that worked for centuries, enslaved men ruling kings, foreign-born warriors defending a native land. They built Cairo's palaces, repelled Mongols and Crusaders, even hosted the Abbasid caliphs after Baghdad fell. For 250 years they were the sword of Islam. But now, that sword is rusting. When his cousin, Sultan al-Ashraf Kansu al-Gawri, died at Majdabik, the empire collapsed into chaos. Emirs fled, soldiers mutinied, provinces drifted away. And yet, somehow, amid the wreckage, Tuman Bey was chosen to lead. The people liked him. He was firm but fair, generous but not soft. A chronicler wrote, "He ruled with justice in an age when justice had forgotten its name. He begins his reign by hanging corrupt officials from the gates of Cairo, a message that even in decline, Egypt has teeth. He reforms the army, summons new levies, orders cannons cast from every scrap of bronze in the city. He even tries to rally old enemies, sending envoys to the Maghreb and Arabia. The Turks will not stop with us, his letters warn. But the replies come too late, or not at all. Still, Cairo answers his call. The streets that once buzzed with poetry now ring with hammer blows. Blacksmiths work through the night forging blades. Carpenters build wagons for the artillery. The great foundry near the Nile spits smoke day and night. You walk past it and feel the heat on your skin. We'll melt our pride into bullets, says one worker grimly. The scholars too take sides. In Al-Azhar, sermons denounce Selim as a usurper. He wears piety on his tongue, one preacher says, but he drinks blood from his cup. The congregation murmurs Amin. For a moment Cairo's heart beats strong again, but the reality beyond the city grows darker by the day. Scouts bring news. The Ottomans have crossed Sinai. Their vanguard has reached Arish, then Salahiyah. The speed of it terrifies everyone. The desert was supposed to protect Egypt, a vast waterless shield. Yet Selim's engineers have built portable wells, their soldiers marching on dried fish and discipline. They move like something more than human. In the council chamber, a general bursts in, dust-caked on his armour. "They're less than a week away," he gasps, "and they have more cannon than we have men." Tuman Bey doesn't flinch. "Then we meet them before they reach Cairo," he says. "We fight them at Ridania." The name hangs in the air. Ridania, a ridge east of the city, overlooking the desert road from Syria. It's the last defensible ground before Cairo itself. The emirs nod slowly. If Egypt must die, better it die on its feet. Preparations begin. The army marches out, a ragged, brilliant thing, glittering with old honour and desperation. You stand on the city walls as they leave. The soldiers chant verses of courage. The people throw dates and flowers in farewell. Mothers press Qurans into their sons' hands. A woman beside you weeps silently. "God protect them," she whispers. You can't tell whether she means the soldiers or the city. Back in the citadel, the Sultan prays alone. He kneels on a carpet worn thin by centuries, his forehead pressed to the ground. "If Egypt must fall," he murmurs, "let it fall remembered." Then he rises, puts on his armour and rides out. The streets part for him. The people shout blessings. Children wave palm branches. For a moment, you could almost believe Cairo might survive. But when you look north, beyond the hills, you see it. A cloud of dust, faint but growing. The horizon shimmers with movement. The Ottoman army is coming, vast and inexorable, like the tide itself. Tuman Bey's final march has begun. The January air over Cairo bites colder than anyone can remember. The wind carries the smell of the desert and the faint iron scent of fear. Beyond the walls, the land stretches into the pale ridges of Ridania, a wasteland of sand and scrub that will soon decide Egypt's fate. Here, Sultan Tuman Bey orders his army to stand. You ride with the soldiers that morning and feel the tremor in the ground as thousands of hooves stamp the earth. The Mamluk banners rise against the dawn, green, red, gold, colours of pride and defiance. Around you, the city's last defenders prepare their lines. Cannon dug into trenches, musketeers positioned on ridges, cavalry waiting in the shadows like restless lions. The clamour of war fills the air, shouted orders, creaking wheels, the clang of swords. Cairo lies just behind you, its domes glimmering faintly in the dust. If this line breaks, the city dies. Tumen Bey rides the field, armour gleaming, a white plume on his helmet, his face streaked with fatigue but alive with purpose. Wherever he passes, men cheer. For Egypt! For the faith! They cry, though their voices tremble beneath the weight of what's coming. The Sultan stops beside his Grand Vizier, the loyal Emir Janbirdi al-Ghazali. Together they scan the horizon. There, Janbirdi says, pointing toward the north. At first you see nothing. Then, faintly, like smoke rising from the edge of the world, the Ottomans appear. They move in perfect formation, ranks of infantry, rows of cavalry, the glint of thousands of spearheads catching the morning light. And behind them, crawling like creatures of legend, come the cannons, vast bronze throats dragged by teams of oxen and sweating men. The earth shudders under their advance. Tumen Bey whispers a prayer. "O God, you know my heart. I do not seek glory, only your mercy." Then he turns to his soldiers and shouts, "Brothers!" They bring thunder. Let us answer with faith. The Mamluks roar in reply. Drums beat. The cavalry wheels into position. The old ways of war, elegance, speed, honour, are about to clash with the new, fire, precision, destruction. When the first Ottoman cannon fires, the sky splits. The explosion rolls across the desert like a storm breaking the world in half. You feel it in your ribs, your teeth, your soul. The Mamluks answer with their own guns, smaller, cruder, but fierce. Smoke blankets the field, thick and choking. Through it, you glimpse flashes of steel, of men charging and dying and charging again. Tumen Bey leads from the front. His horse plunges through the smoke, his curved sword arcs in the air. Every strike seems to carry all of Egypt behind it. His guards ride close, shouting warnings, but he's beyond fear now, a man burning with purpose. "Drive them back," he cries. "For Cairo!" For a moment it works. The Mamluk cavalry, masters of close combat for centuries, cuts deep into the Ottoman flank. Janissaries fall, musketeers scatter, the Ottoman lines buckle. You hear cheers rippling down the Mamluk ranks. Wild, unbelieving joy. Perhaps the miracle will happen after all. But Selim the Grim did not build an empire on miracles. From the rear, his reserve regiments surge forward. Thousands of fresh soldiers, disciplined and silent. His cannons re-aim, their gunners methodical. "Steady," Selim murmurs from horseback, his eyes fixed on the smoke ahead. Then, almost softly, "Fire." The second volley changes everything. The cannonballs rip through the Mamluk lines, tearing horses and men apart. You see banners vanish mid-air, swallowed by dust and screams. The Mamluk cavalry tries to rally, but the guns don't stop. Their glorious charge collapses into chaos. Elegance drowned in gunpowder. Tumen Bey refuses to retreat. "Hold the trenches!" he shouts, even as his horse rears from an explosion. His face is blackened with soot, his armour dented. Janbirdi rides up beside him, shouting, "Sultan, we must fall back." "Back to what?" Tumen Bey snarls. "Cairo will burn whether we stand or flee." But the tide is unstoppable. The Ottoman Janissaries advance, muskets blazing, drums pounding like the heartbeat of the world's new order. The Mamluk trenches are overrun. The cannons fall silent one by one. The air reeks of smoke and sweat and metal. You see Tumen Bey dismount, rallying a circle of his best men around the Egyptian standard. "We are not slaves!" he roars, and the last Mamluks charge, a final, furious burst of motion against the endless rhythm of Ottoman gunfire. It's beautiful for one terrible instant, then it's gone. By noon, the field of Ridania is a graveyard. The sand is churned red. The banners lie trampled and torn. The Mamluk army is shattered. Bodies smoulder beside broken guns. The cries of the wounded fade into the wind. Selim rides onto the field slowly, his horse picking its way among the dead. He surveys the ruin, the wreck of an age, and says nothing. One of his generals kneels. "The field is yours, Majesty." Selim glances toward the southern horizon. where the faint outline of Cairo glimmers through the haze. "Not yet," he replies. "The heart still beats." Tumen Bey escapes with a handful of survivors, vanishing into the dust. Behind him, the Ottoman banners turn toward Cairo. The city's fate is sealed, but it doesn't know it yet. In the mosques, the imams still preach defiance. In the markets, people still whisper that the Sultan will return victorious. You stand on the walls again at dusk and see it. That black line of soldiers stretching to the horizon, torches flickering like stars turned upside down. The Ottomans have come to claim the mother of cities. And somewhere in the dying light, the last Mamluk sultan whispers, "Not while I breathe." Cairo wakes to the sound of thunder that isn't from the sky. The Ottomans have reached the city gates. From the citadel to the Khan al-Khalili bazaar, people pour into the streets in confusion, not yet realizing that the noise shaking their windows isn't a storm but cannon fire. Somewhere a child screams. Somewhere else a muezzin's call trembles and cuts short. The city that has ruled empires for centuries now stands trembling before the guns of a new one. At dawn, the Ottoman banners appear on the horizon, black and red against the gold of the desert. Their cannons roll into position on the ridges beyond the city. From the minarets of Al-Azhar, smoke can be seen curling upward where the Battle of Ridania still smoulders. Cairo's defenders, what's left of them, stagger back through the northern gates, wounded, bleeding, broken. The Mamluk cavalry that once terrified Crusaders and Mongols now drags itself through the streets, its armour dented and its horses collapsing beneath the weight of defeat. The people whisper, "Is the Sultan dead?" No one answers. Tumen Bey has vanished, fled across the Nile with a few hundred men. Some say he's gathering reinforcements in Giza, others swear he's fallen, but no one truly knows. Cairo is leaderless, terrified, and vast, a city of 1,000,000 souls caught between memory and fate. Selim the Grim watches from a hill just beyond the city, his cloak billowing in the wind. Behind him, rows of janissaries stand ready, their muskets gleaming like rows of teeth. He lifts a spyglass to his eye, studying the skyline, the citadel, the domes of the Sultan Hassan Mosque, the twisting smoke from the bazaars. "The jewel of the world," he murmurs, his voice flat. Then, to his generals, "Take it, but do not destroy it, unless it resists. The order is clear. Mercy, if possible. Fire, if necessary." The first cannon volley hits the Bab al-Nasser gate. The ancient stone shatters under the impact, raining dust and screams into the narrow streets. The Ottomans move fast, disciplined, mechanical. Janissaries pour through the breach, muskets firing in controlled bursts. Behind them come the Sipahi cavalry, sabres drawn. Cairo's defenders fight desperately, but it's chaos. The city's labyrinthine alleys turn against them. Horses can't charge, cannons can't turn. The noise is unbearable. Metal on stone, the crack of muskets, the low roar of flames beginning to spread. You see it unfold from the rooftops, the city collapsing in slow motion. A Mamluk detachment fights from the windows of the Mosque of Baybars, sniping at the invaders until the Ottomans set the doors ablaze. In the Khan al-Khalili market, merchants bar their shops and pray. Smoke rises from the spice stalls, mingling with the scent of cloves and burning wood. Women wail from balconies, clutching Qurans to their chests. The citadel itself becomes a fortress. A few hundred Mamluk guards, led by Tumen Bey's cousin, barricade the gates and raise the green banner of resistance. Cannonballs slam into the walls, breaking off chunks of marble that had stood since Saladin's day. Inside, soldiers and servants load muskets and carry water to put out fires. Above it all, the great dome of the mosque trembles but holds. By midday, the battle becomes a nightmare. The Ottomans fan out across the city, securing bridges, seizing granaries, surrounding the citadel. The Nile runs thick with debris, boats burned, planks shattered, bodies floating past the banks. The sun turns the smoke golden, and the air tastes like ash. You catch glimpses of small heroics that history will forget. A Mamluk archer, half his face burned, looses one last arrow from a rooftop before collapsing. A baker's wife drags wounded soldiers into her home, tearing her veil to make bandages. A child climbs a minaret to hang a white cloth as a sign of surrender, and is shot down before he reaches the top. And yet, Cairo does not surrender easily. Even without their sultan, the people fight back. Stones, oil, even boiling water rain down from the roofs onto Ottoman troops. The janissaries, Furious, retaliate house by house. The old wooden neighbourhoods catch fire. By sunset, entire quarters of the city blaze, orange light flickering against the mosque's marble domes. Selim watches the inferno from his camp. His generals await orders to finish it, but he hesitates. No, he says, let it burn itself out. The city must learn who rules it, but it must live to serve. He turns away from the flames, his silhouette black against the firelit sky. Inside the walls, the chaos becomes something primal. People loot what they can: grain, gold, even Qurans torn from libraries. Some claim to fight for Egypt, others for survival. The call to prayer is drowned by cannon fire. The mosques ring with screams instead of sermons. At last, as night falls, the resistance falters. Exhausted, starved, and surrounded, the remaining Mamluks withdraw into the citadel. The Ottomans close the gates behind them and begin their grim ascent up the hill. One by one, the great lamps of Cairo go dark. By dawn, the city belongs to Selim. The Ottoman banners rise above the citadel, rippling in the morning wind. The drums of victory roll across the valley. The conquerors march through the streets, their faces smeared with soot, their eyes hollow. The people watch from doorways, silent, defeated. But somewhere beyond the Nile, in the villages west of Giza, the embers of resistance still glow. Tumen Bey lives, and the war for Egypt isn't over yet. The smoke over Cairo hasn't even cleared before word spreads. Tumen Bey lives. Like a rumour born from hope itself, it moves faster than fear. In the narrow alleys, in the courtyards of mosques, in the whispers of soldiers too ashamed to return home, it becomes a kind of miracle. The Sultan crossed the Nile, they say. He escaped at night. He rides again, and somewhere west of Giza, amid palm groves and sand, that miracle breathes. You find him there, weary, dust-caked, eyes rimmed with exhaustion but alive. Around him gather the remnants of an empire, a few hundred Mamluks, tribal horsemen, farmers with spears, and slaves who refuse to surrender. They camp beside the Nile's slow, glittering water, the same river that once carried pharaohs and caliphs to glory. Now it hides a fugitive king. Tumen Bey sits by the water's edge, washing the soot from his face. His armour is dented, his horse thin, but his voice when he speaks is steady. Cairo is not lost, he says to his men. Cairo is wounded. And I am her pulse. It's a desperate dream, but desperation is all Egypt has left. Across the river, the Ottomans consolidate their victory. Selim enters the city in triumph, though his expression barely changes. He rides through streets still slick with ash, past burned bazaars and shattered mosques. At the citadel, he dismounts before the gate of Saladin, gazing up at the massive walls. His generals bow. "The city is yours, Majesty." Selim's reply is quiet. "It was never mine. It belongs to God and to order." Then, without fanfare, he enters the palace. Inside, the marble halls echo with emptiness. The Mamluk banners have been stripped, the gold emblems torn down. The few surviving emirs kneel before him, their eyes hollow. Selim orders them pardoned, publicly, and executed, privately. Cairo will have peace, even if it must come from silence. But outside the walls, the silence doesn't hold. Each night across the Nile, fires bloom on the horizon, small at first, then brighter, nearer. Ottoman patrols vanish in the desert. Supply wagons are found burned to cinders. Scouts whisper of ambushes in the palm groves, of arrows whistling out of the dark. The Mamluks are fighting again, not as lords now, but as shadows. Tumen Bey has learned from defeat. He can't match Selim's cannons or numbers, but he knows the land, every dune, every bend in the Nile, every village that will still feed him. His men strike swiftly, melt away faster than smoke. They raid Ottoman outposts, free prisoners, burn bridges, and vanish into the desert before dawn. The Nile becomes a highway of ghosts. You ride with them one night. The moon is thin, the air cold. The men move in silence, faces veiled against the dust. Tumen Bey leads from the front, as always. He's no longer dressed like a sultan. His silks are gone, replaced by plain armour, but his presence still commands. "We fight for Egypt," he tells his followers softly. "Not for gold, not for thrones, for her." At a small village north of Giza, they strike. The Ottomans, camped along the riverbank, wake too late. Arrows rain from the dark. The tents burst into flames. Gunfire cracks through the night, echoing across the water. For a few glorious moments it feels like the world has turned back, like courage still matters more than artillery. The Turks retreat, leaving weapons and wounded behind. The Mamluks vanish before dawn, their laughter fading into the wind. When news reaches Cairo, Selim's fury is volcanic. "You told me he was dead," he roars at his generals. The marble floor of the citadel shakes under his boots. "You told me Egypt was tamed." His vizier bows low. Majesty, the desert protects him. He moves like a mirage. Selim stares out the window toward the west. "Then we will chase the mirage until it dies." He orders patrols sent daily, rewards posted for any who betray the fugitive sultan. Whole villages are burned on suspicion of harbouring rebels. For every Ottoman soldier slain, 10 Egyptians are executed. The message is clear. Mercy is over, but the brutality backfires. The more Selim punishes, the more the people whisper Tumen Bey's name. He becomes legend, the Lion of the Nile, the Shadow Sultan. Children chant songs about him in the markets. The Turk takes gold, the Mamluk takes heart. The spirit of resistance spreads like floodwater through the fields. You see it in the faces of farmers who hide Mamluk soldiers in their granaries, in the fishermen who ferry rebels across the river at night. One old woman tells you, "We have seen many masters, but only he fights for us, not from us." Still, even legends can't fight forever. Supplies run low, horses collapse from exhaustion. Each skirmish costs lives the Mamluks can't replace. The Ottomans press closer each day, their ranks endless, their fire unrelenting. By early March, Tumen Bey's forces are dwindling. He looks thinner now, older, but his resolve never falters. "If Cairo must live in chains," he says one night, "let her remember I tried to break them." His men listen in silence. None doubt his courage, but you can feel the despair creeping in like cold. They've fought giants with swords of straw, and even bravery has its limits. In Cairo, Selim waits. He doesn't ride out himself now. He doesn't need to. He simply watches from the citadel balcony, gazing westward at the faint fires across the Nile. "Every ember," he murmurs, "is a fool who still believes Egypt can dream." He sends his last order to his generals. "End it. Bring me his head or his surrender. No more ghosts." And so, the Ottomans march once more, across the bridges, through the smoke, into the desert's endless glare. Somewhere beyond the palms, the last Mamluk sultan waits to write the final line of his story. The sun over the Nile burns white and merciless, bleaching the land until it looks like bone. For weeks now, the Ottoman patrols have scoured every palm grove, every sandbar, every bend of the river. The rumours of Tumen Bey, the Lion of Egypt, the Sultan of Shadows, have begun to sound like myth. "He's fled to Arabia," some soldiers say. "No," others whisper. "He hides among the Bedouin, gathering another army." In truth, he's still here, ragged, half-starved, but still breathing. You find him one evening near the edge of the delta, his tent pitched beneath a cluster of palms. The wind off the river smells of mud and smoke. Around him, fewer than 200 men remain. Some Mamluks, some villagers, some thieves turned patriots. Their armour is rusted, their clothes torn, but their eyes are fierce. A handful of horses graze nearby, ribs showing through their skin. It's not an army anymore. It's a heartbeat refusing to stop. Tumen Bey sits cross-legged on the ground, sharpening his sword. He's thinner now, his face lined, his beard streaked with grey, but his hands are steady. "Every empire bleeds in the end," he says quietly, almost to himself. "Let them bleed here." He looks up at the few soldiers still with him. "Tomorrow we strike again." The plan is madness. Another raid, this time at dawn, on an Ottoman garrison near the village of Mitdamsis. The men nod anyway. What else can they do but fight? When the morning comes, the Nile lies calm, its surface smooth as glass. Mist curls above the water. The rebels move through it like ghosts, their oars silent, their hearts loud. The first musket shot cracks the air, then another. The camp explodes in confusion. Ottoman soldiers scrambling, tents collapsing, gunfire flashing through the fog. Tumen Bey leads from the front as always, his sword arc silver in the light. "For Cairo!" he shouts, and for a heartbeat it feels like the old world again. The Mamluks strike hard, cutting down sentries, scattering patrols, seizing cannons. The Ottomans, stunned, fall back toward the riverbank. Victory, tiny, bloody, fleeting, seems almost possible. But then the second wave comes. From the east, through the mist, the Ottoman reinforcements appear, rows upon rows of janissaries, their muskets glinting like stars. They move with terrifying calm, their boots splashing through the shallows in perfect rhythm. Behind them, cannons rumble into place. "Fire," a voice commands, and the morning erupts. The first volley rips through the rebels' lines. Men fall, horses rear and crash into the mud. The Mamluks try to charge, but there's nowhere to go. The river at their backs, the Ottomans in front. Tumen Bey fights like a man possessed, his sword flashing in every direction. His men rally around him, shouting his name. For every Turk that falls, 10 more step forward. "Back," someone screams. "To the boats!" But there are no boats left. They've drifted away or sunk. The water turns red. The air fills with the smell of powder and blood. You see him then, the Sultan of Egypt, standing ankle-deep in the Nile, surrounded on all sides. His banner has fallen, his armour is cracked. He grips his sword in both hands, breathing hard, his chest heaving. He looks more prophet than king now, defiant against the tide. Then a voice calls out over the din, a familiar one. "Tumen Bey!" It's one of his former allies, Emir Hassan al-Janbadi, who defected weeks ago to save himself. He rides at the head of an Ottoman column, face pale beneath his turban. "Yield," he shouts. "The Sultan Selim offers mercy." Tumen Bey laughs, a dry, exhausted sound. "Mercy? Tell your master Egypt doesn't kneel." He raises his sword again, but his horse stumbles in the mud. An Ottoman musket fires. The bullet tears through his arm. He drops to one knee, gasping. Soldiers close in. Someone grabs his wrist. Another strikes his back. He fights until his sword slips from his hand. Then the world collapses into mud, smoke and silence. When he wakes, he's bound in chains. Around him stand Turkish officers, staring down at him with a mix of awe and pity. His wounds have been dressed, roughly, but enough to keep him alive. Outside he can hear the river moving, endless and indifferent. "Take him to the Sultan," one of the officers says. And so begins his final journey, not as ruler or rebel, but as prisoner. The Ottomans ferry him by boat down the Nile, past villages that once sang his name. Farmers pause from their work to stare. Some bow their heads, others raise their fists. The guards strike anyone who looks too long. In Cairo, Selim receives the news calmly. He's sitting in the citadel's great audience hall, surrounded by marble columns and the spoils of conquest, silks, armour, manuscripts. "He's alive, Majesty," says his vizier, "captured at Mitdamsis." Selim nods once. "Bring him here." The court murmurs, surprise, curiosity, perhaps unease. No one knows whether the Sultan means to pardon or destroy him. Selim doesn't say. He rises, walks to the window and looks out over Cairo's skyline. The city shimmers in the afternoon light, smoke from its burned quarters still rising like prayers. "Egypt is quiet," he says softly, "but ghosts have long tongues." Let us hear this one speak. Meanwhile, in the prison below, Tumen Bey sits in the dark, chains clinking as he shifts. His body aches, but his mind is sharp. "They think they've won," he whispers, "but the Nile still flows my way." Outside, the guards prepare to escort him to the citadel. The same fortress that once crowned him Sultan will now decide how history remembers him. The Nile carries him back to the city that was once his throne. The boat drifts slowly through the dusk, its hull creaking as if the river itself mourns. Tumen Bey sits in chains, his wrists raw from iron, his face streaked with dried blood and sweat. Around him, Ottoman guards stand silent, their armour catching the last light of the setting sun. Cairo rises before him, its skyline familiar yet changed, smoke still curling from burnt quarters, minarets blackened at their tips, the citadel looming like a judge above it all. For a moment, he closes his eyes. He can still remember the city's sounds as they once were, the clatter of merchants in the Khan al-Khalili, the laughter of children running through the alleys, the deep, steady call of the muezzin echoing from every dome. Now it's quiet, too quiet. The conquerors have taught Cairo silence. At the riverbank, the guards shove him ashore. Chains rattle. Crowds gather, but not too close. Afraid to be seen. Afraid to look away. Some whisper his name. Some cross themselves in prayer. He walks barefoot through the streets he once ruled, escorted by soldiers who speak a language he barely understands. The cobblestones are hot beneath his feet. His shadow stretches long and thin before him. The people weep, but softly. They remember his courage, his fairness, his refusal to abandon them. Women throw handfuls of dust into the air, a gesture of mourning older than Islam itself. Men lower their heads as he passes. "May God reward you, Sultan," one cries. A janissary strikes him across the mouth. "Silence," the soldier growls, but the word Sultan lingers in the air, stubborn and sacred. The procession climbs toward the citadel. Every step echoes against the ancient stones. The sun dips lower, staining the city red, as if the sky itself recalls the blood that was spilled. From the fortress walls, Selim watches the column approach. His eyes narrow, but there's no triumph in them, only calculation. Tumen Bey is brought before him in the great audience hall, a chamber lined with marble and gold. The air smells of incense and dust. Selim sits on a low throne, not in splendour, but in control. His robes dark, his hands resting lightly on his knees. Around him stand his generals, the scholars of Cairo he has summoned, and the last Abbasid caliph, brought from the shadows to witness the moment. For a long time, no one speaks. The two men, conqueror and conquered, simply look at each other. Selim's gaze is steady, curious. Tumen Bey's is defiant, almost serene. "So," Selim says finally, his Turkish accent thick over the Arabic words. "You are the last of the Mamluks." Tumen Bey lifts his chin. "The last ruler of a free Egypt," he answers. Selim studies him. "You fought well. You could have surrendered. I might have kept you as my governor. I was not made to serve thieves of other men's crowns," Tumen Bey replies. His voice is low but clear, carrying through the hall. A murmur passes among the scholars. Even the Ottoman guards shift uneasily. Selim's expression doesn't change. "You call me a thief," he says quietly, "and yet you lost everything you claimed to protect." Perhaps God prefers order to pride. Tumen Bey's smile is faint, almost kind. Order built on fear is not God's order. You will rule Egypt, yes, but she will never belong to you. For the first time, something flickers in Selim's eyes. Not anger, but recognition. He rises, tall and sharp as a blade. "Enough," he says. "You fought bravely and spoke boldly. I will not humiliate you with more talk." He gestures to his guards. "Take him away. Let Cairo see what happens when lions challenge the storm." The soldiers drag him back through the corridors of the citadel. The torches flicker on the walls, their smoke curling like ghosts. Outside, the evening wind carries the scent of the Nile. The path leads downhill through the same gate where generations of rulers once rode out in triumph. Now it will be remembered for something else. They bring him to Bab Suela, the ancient southern gate of Cairo. Its twin minarets rise like watchful sentinels above the market square. The crowd is already there. Thousands of faces packed shoulder to shoulder, silent except for the low hum of prayer. The Ottomans have strung a rope between the towers. The executioners stand ready. When Tumen Bey sees the place, he stops walking. His guards shove him forward, but he turns to face them calmly. "Here," he says, "here, where the great emirs once watched parades, fitting." He lifts his gaze to the crowd. "People of Egypt," he calls out, his voice steady, echoing through the square. "I have done all I could. Forgive me for what I could not." Someone in the crowd sobs, others bow their heads, even some janissaries look away. He kneels briefly, touching his forehead to the ground. "Into your hands, O Lord of the Nile and the desert," he whispers, "I return what was never mine." The rope tightens, the world holds its breath. Then, with one pull, the last Mamluk Sultan rises against the sky, his body swaying gently between the towers. No sound follows, not a cheer, not a cry, just the wind sighing through the streets. Selim's soldiers post guards around the square, forbidding anyone to remove the body. For 3 days it hangs there, a warning, a memory, a martyrdom. At night, candles flicker secretly at the base of the gate placed by those who still dare to remember. And above it all, Cairo keeps breathing. The city doesn't die, it absorbs, as it always does. The smoke clears, the markets reopen, and life resumes its rhythm, a little quieter, a little older but unbroken. The Mamluks are gone, but their ghost lingers in every stone, every story. And for generations afterward, when children pass beneath Bab Zuwayla at dusk, their mothers whisper, "Walk softly, my child." The Sultan still watches from the gate Cairo never forgets. The wind still whispers through the narrow alleys of the old city, and if you listen closely near Bab Zuwayla at dusk, you can almost hear the creak of rope and the faint murmur of prayers. The last Sultan's ghost lingers, not as a shadow of vengeance, but as a memory of what dignity sounds like when the world ends. It's been days since Tumen Bey's body was taken down. The Ottomans finally allowed the scholars of Al-Azhar to bury him, quietly, without ceremony. They laid him in the sand beyond the city walls, near the same Nile that once reflected his banners. No tomb, no inscription, just a prayer whispered by those brave enough to attend. Yet word of his resting place spreads like wind through reeds. The people visit at night, leaving palm leaves, coins, scraps of poetry. He fought for us, they say softly. He died standing. But while Cairo mourns, the world moves on. Selim the Grim has no time for ghosts. He sits in the citadel, methodically dismantling what's left of the Mamluk state. Their emirs are executed or exiled, their armies disbanded, their fortresses seized. The very system that built Egypt's might, the Mamluk corps of soldier slaves, is dissolved with a stroke of his pen. There will be no more kings in armour, he tells his vizier, only servants of order. The change is immediate and absolute. Mamluk nobles who once ruled provinces now kneel as Ottoman administrators. Egyptian gold flows north to Constantinople, funding new mosques and cannons. The Abbasid Caliph, a powerless descendant kept by the Mamluks as a symbol, is summoned to Selim's presence. The old man trembles as he hands the Caliph's robe and sword to the conqueror. "By the will of God," he says, "I entrust to you the guardianship of the faithful." And with that gesture history bends. The caliphate passes from Cairo to Istanbul. The Ottomans become not just rulers, but the spiritual heirs of Islam's heart. Selim takes a new title, Qadim al-Haramain al-Sharifain, servant of the two holy sanctuaries Mecca and Medina. The word servant sounds humble, but everyone knows its true weight. The master of the world's faith has changed. You walk through Cairo and feel the shift like a chill. The Mamluks ruled through spectacle, parades, processions, lavish architecture. The Ottomans rule through silence and order. Soldiers patrol the streets in perfect lines, their armour dark and identical. Tax collectors record every grain of wheat, every drop of water. The city is cleaner, quieter, less alive. Still, the Ottomans understand Cairo's worth. They do not loot the city the way conquerors once did. Instead, they preserve it. Repair mosques, reopen markets, rebuild bridges. To the world, it looks like peace. But you can feel what's missing. Pride. The air that once rang with Cairo's laughter and arrogance is now heavy with obedience. In the palaces of the old emirs, new Turkish governors dine beneath ceilings painted with the names of men they destroyed. They admire the art, the mosaics, the calligraphy, then sign decrees that erase the artist's patrons from memory. The past is beautiful, one remarks, sipping pomegranate wine, so long as it stays buried. And yet, the past refuses to stay buried. The people remember in small ways, a verse carved on a fountain, a song hummed by a market girl. The calligraphers who still sign their work with the old emblems of the Mamluk sultans, hidden in the curves of the script. Cairo mourns not by wailing, but by remembering quietly, endlessly. Selim himself doesn't stay long. Egypt is too hot, too unruly, too full of ghosts. He spends his days issuing edicts, and his nights pacing the citadel's terrace, staring at the city lights below. His advisors urge him to return to Constantinople. "You have conquered the world," one says. "Leave the dead to their dreams." Before he departs, Selim performs one last act. He rides to the mosque of Al-Azhar, the city's beating intellectual heart. The scholars gather, nervous but curious. He addresses them not as a tyrant, but as a ruler who wants legitimacy. "I am not your destroyer," he says. "I am your protector. Egypt will serve the faith, not kings." The crowd listens, some nod, others remain still. When he leaves, one elderly scholar murmurs, "A protector who builds his throne on a gallows." Selim doesn't hear him. He's already thinking of Mecca, of Medina, of empire. When he finally leaves Cairo, the procession is immense. Soldiers, cannons, caravans loaded with treasure and relics. Among them are the keys to the holy cities and the Abbasid relics of the Prophet. His cloak, his sword, his standard. Selim carries them north, back to Constantinople. back to his waiting empire. The people of Cairo watch from rooftops as the banners vanish into the distance. Some cheer, most stay silent. A woman beside you whispers, "The world's heart just moved away." And it's true. For nearly 3 centuries, Cairo was the centre of the Islamic world, the home of the caliphs, the stage of sultans, the mind of scholars. Now it has become something quieter, a province, a memory, a pearl placed in another man's crown. But the Nile keeps flowing, patient as time. The markets reopen, the minarets call again. Cairo, wounded but unbroken, learns to live beneath the crescent of another sky. You walk along the river that evening and look up at the citadel. Its towers glow gold in the fading sun, the same stones that once heard Tuman Bey swear to defend Egypt to his last breath. The wind rises off the Nile, cool and constant. You could almost believe he's still up there, watching, waiting, whispering through the stone. Egypt is eternal. The conquerors just borrow her. The days after Selim's departure feel strangely hollow, as if Cairo is learning to breathe with one lung. The city is intact, but something in its pulse has changed. Slower, quieter, cautious. The Ottoman banners still hang from the citadel, their red cloth snapping in the wind, but the foreign soldiers who patrol the gates seem more like shadows than rulers. They keep order, yes, but the order feels cold, imported, unnatural. Cairo, the great mother of the world, now walks barefoot under a stranger's sky. In the bazaars, people still whisper the same question. Was Tuman Bey the last? No one says his name loudly. It's dangerous now. Ottoman spies linger everywhere, their ears trained for defiance. Still, the people remember. The storytellers in the coffee houses speak of him as the Sultan who fought alone, the lion who would not kneel. They tell his story with hands raised, voices low, eyes bright, and each time a few more listeners gather, pretending to sip coffee, pretending not to cry. The new Ottoman governor of Cairo, a stern man named Kaya Bey, rules with Selim's iron seal. He was once a Mamluk himself, a traitor who betrayed Egypt to save his own skin. The people call him Kaya the Black Heart, never to his face. He walks through the streets in robes heavy with gold, surrounded by guards, but every time he passes, doors close and shutters creak shut. He has wealth, but no honour. In the mosques, the imams now mention Selim's name in the Friday prayers. May God protect the Sultan of Islam. It sounds strange to Egyptian ears, this foreign name rising where once the caliphs and Mamluks were praised. Some hesitate before saying Amin, and the pause echoes louder than the prayer itself. You wander through the city, through neighbourhoods half rebuilt, half ruined. The Khan al-Khalili bazaar smells of cinnamon and dust. The coppersmiths hammer again, the glassmakers fire their furnaces. Life resumes because it must. Yet beneath the clatter of trade you can sense the heaviness. A city haunted not by death but by memory. At night the scholars of Al-Azhar gather in secret to discuss what comes next. They know the Ottoman rule is strong, perhaps unbreakable, but they refuse to let Egypt's soul vanish. One of them, a young jurist, speaks softly. The sword failed us, but the word will not. If we cannot rule, we will teach. And so, slowly, Al-Azhar transforms from a palace's ornament into the city's conscience. In time, Cairo's intellect becomes its rebellion. The Ottomans bring their soldiers, but the Egyptians answer with books. New scholars rise, new poets speak, new sciences bloom in the corners of old mosques. You can conquer the body, one imam writes, but not the mind that prays. Still, the scars remain. The Mamluk palaces stand half empty, once the pride of Egypt, now silent. Their marble fountains collect dust, their courtyards echo with footsteps that never belong there. Ottoman officers use them as barracks. Soldiers sleep beneath ceilings painted with Quranic verses they can't read. When the wind blows through, it stirs the scent of old incense and blood. Every now and then, rumours flare up, that Mamluk survivors plot revenge in the desert, that Bedouin tribes shelter their heirs, that one day Egypt will rise again. The Ottomans dismiss them as superstition. But you hear the merchants whisper in the markets, the Nile remembers its sons. One evening, you stand on the banks of that same river. The sun dips low, turning the water the colour of copper. You can see the citadel in the distance, its walls catching the last light. A fisherman beside you mutters, "We bury our kings, but the Nile never stops singing for them." He throws his net into the current and adds, "Even Selim will be dust soon. The river will still be here." Far to the north, the Ottoman Empire expands, swallowing Arabia, Mesopotamia, the Balkans. Constantinople becomes the capital of faith and empire, its mosques crowned with domes that echo the sky. But here in Cairo, the faith feels older, slower, deeper. The Ottomans rule by decree, the Egyptians endure by habit. It's not defiance, not exactly, more like the quiet refusal to forget. Kaya Bey tries to stamp it out. He orders the story of Tumen Bey erased from chronicles. No mention of rebels, he decrees. The scribes nod obediently, and then hide copies of the old histories under the mosque floors. The memory of the fallen sultan survives not in books, but in murmurs, prayers, and lullabies. Mothers sing to their children, "Sleep, my son, and dream of lions." And somewhere, perhaps in those dreams, the spirit of Egypt keeps breathing. A year after the conquest, Selim sends an emissary back from Istanbul bearing gifts, coins, fabrics, and an imperial decree praising Egypt's loyalty. Kaya Bey reads it aloud in the citadel courtyard while the city listens below. His voice trembles as he speaks the words peace and prosperity. The people stand in silence, their faces expressionless. When he finishes, no one cheers. That night, the moon rises over Cairo, pale and perfect. The wind drifts through the empty corridors of the old palaces, brushing the dust off abandoned armour and faded silks. Somewhere beneath those stones, the last echo of a Mamluk trumpet lingers. You can almost hear it, faint, distant, stubborn. It isn't a song of mourning anymore, it's a whisper of memory, repeating through time like the Nile itself. Empires pass, Egypt remains. Years slip quietly through Cairo's narrow veins. The dust settles, the blood dries, and the city learns to move beneath its new masters. Ottoman banners fade from bright scarlet to dusty rose, the colour of sunset over the desert. The soldiers still patrol the gates, the tax collectors still fill their ledgers, and the call to prayer still rises above it all. Older, purer, untouchable. Yet beneath that calm surface the memory of conquest breathes on, invisible, but alive. You walk through the city one afternoon when the air is thick with heat and incense. The markets buzz again. Spice traders shouting prices, camel drivers swearing at one another, the clink of copper pots and silver bracelets. On the surface, Cairo looks whole. But if you listen between the noises, you can hear the sigh of something broken long ago and never mended. Kaya Bey, the Ottoman governor, grows rich. His palace on the Nile shimmers with imported marble and silk. But he sleeps poorly. He hears whispers through the corridors at night, footsteps that stop when he turns, voices that fade when he listens. He tells his guards it's the wind, but the servants know better. "The lion walks at night," they whisper, meaning Tumen Bey's ghost. Even the soldiers refuse to patrol the southern courtyard after midnight. He still watches the gate, they say, waiting for his people to remember. In truth, they already do. The people of Cairo haven't forgiven Kaya Bey for his betrayal, the Mamluk who sold Egypt to her conquerors. They obey him, but no one greets him. No mother names her son after him. In the coffee houses, the poets mock him with rhymes disguised as love songs. One goes, "He traded his sword for a pen and still could not write honour." And Kaya Bey hears them and laughs publicly, but his hand always trembles when he drinks. Selim's empire grows in the north, grand and unstoppable. Istanbul blooms, domes rising, palaces glittering, scholars and artisans brought from every corner of the conquered world. But Selim himself doesn't live to enjoy his triumph for long. He dies suddenly in 1520, only 3 years after Cairo's fall. Some say it was poison, others whisper divine justice. The news reaches Egypt slowly, carried down the Nile by traders and sailors. When it comes, people do not cheer, they simply look at each other in silence. Even sultans return to dust, says an old merchant softly. Under Selim's son, Suleiman the Magnificent, the empire flourishes. His rule is wiser, his touch lighter. Cairo becomes one of the jewels of his dominion, an administrative heart of Africa and Arabia. The Ottomans repair what war broke: aqueducts, bridges, madrasas. They send engineers to study the Nile floods, architects to restore the mosques. To the outside world, it looks like resurrection. But for the people who remember the Mamluks, it feels like a kind of museum. Beautiful, ordered, but hollow. You visit the old citadel one evening. The same stones where Tumen Bey once stood still gleam with the same sunset. The guards are Turkish now, but they still bow their heads when they pass the gate of Bab Zuayla. Our fathers told us what happened there, one whispers. Better to bow to ghosts than to hang beside them. The Ottomans try to erase the Mamluks from history, but they can't erase their architecture. The mosques of Baybars, Kalawun and Hassan still pierce the skyline, their domes more graceful than any new Turkish one. Cairo itself becomes a living museum of the empire that came before. Ottoman officials boast of its beauty without realizing they're praising their predecessors. Look what we have inherited, they say. The Egyptians smile politely and think, inherited, yes, but never built. Even religion adapts. The ulama of Al-Azhar, once servants of the Mamluk court, now swear loyalty to Istanbul. But within their sermons they plant quiet reminders of Egypt's separate soul. Empires come and go, says one sheikh during Friday prayer, but the land of the prophets endures. The congregation murmurs Amin, and every voice holds a double meaning. In the villages along the Nile, the Mamluk names live on in other ways. Fishermen tell stories of Tumen Bey appearing in dreams to bless their nets. Farmers swear they see his white horse galloping through the mist at dawn. Children play games where one calls himself the Sultan of the Nile and refuses to yield. The Ottomans scoff, but the people just smile. Myths are harder to rule than men. As decades pass, Cairo begins to look Ottoman, but it never becomes Ottoman. The Turkish officials build new houses of prayer, elegant, geometric but foreign in spirit. They lack the warmth of the old stone, the rhythm of Egyptian craftsmanship. Their mosques reach upward, one old mason says, but ours listen sideways toward the river. He gestures toward the Nile gleaming under the moon. Water remembers better than marble. Even the new governors start to realize they cannot govern Egypt by force alone. They begin to rely on the same Mamluk families they once destroyed, descendants of warriors turned landlords, merchants, scholars. Within a century, the descendants of Tumen Bey's soldiers hold the real power again quietly, behind the Ottoman facade. History bends, but it never breaks. You walk through Cairo at night, hearing the hum of the city, the merchants closing shop, the cats prowling rooftops, the sound of the river beyond the walls. A breeze moves through the palms, carrying faint traces of song. Somewhere a blind poet recites verses under a lantern. They hanged our sultan, but not our pride. The Nile still carries his shadow in its tide. The crowd listens, heads bowed. No soldiers interrupt. Maybe they've stopped caring, or maybe even they have learned to love the myth. And as the poet's voice fades into the night, you feel it again, that strange calm that follows tragedy, the peace that isn't peace but endurance. Egypt breathes slowly, endlessly. She has been conquered 100 times and yet never truly owned. The Ottomans will rule her for centuries, but in every whisper of the wind, every call to prayer, every ripple of the Nile, the same old truth murmurs beneath it all. Cairo bows, but Egypt never kneels. Time, like the Nile, never stops moving. It only changes course. 100 years after Tumen Bey's death, Cairo still stands as bright and restless as ever, though its soul has learned to hide behind courtesy. The Ottomans call it Misr el-Marusa, Egypt the Protected, but everyone knows that protection comes with a chain. The empire governs from afar. Istanbul sends its pashas and tax collectors, but Cairo governs itself in whispers. You walk through its streets now, and you'd think the city had forgotten conquest. The markets are loud again, the mosques alive, the scholars in Al-Azhar busy arguing about philosophy, law and astronomy. But in every corner of this life hums an old ache. Not quite grief, not quite anger, something quieter. Pride turned into patience. The Mamluks, or what's left of them, have returned, not as kings, but as power behind the curtain. Their descendants, once hunted to extinction, have learned the art of survival. They buy Ottoman titles with gold, marry Turkish nobles' daughters, and build their own networks in the shadows. They control the taxes, the land, the armies. A Turkish pasha might rule for a year or two, but everyone in Cairo knows who truly holds the reins. The Mamluk sword, an old saying goes, still glitters beneath the Ottoman robe. At Al-Azhar, the scholars teach students from every corner of the empire. Yemen, Sudan, Anatolia, even faraway Bosnia. The courtyard buzzes with debates, prayers, and the murmur of learning. One young teacher recites a verse of remembrance before his class begins. They took the throne from our fathers, but not the light from our hearts. His students nod. They know he's speaking of history without saying its name. The Ottomans try, now and then, to tighten their grip. A new governor arrives every few years, determined to make Cairo obey. He collects harsh taxes, demands silence, threatens the scholars. But Egypt's genius is endurance. The city smiles, nods, waits. The Pasha soon learns what every conqueror has. Egypt swallows tyrants the way the Nile swallows stones. One of them, Ahmad Pasha, sent by Istanbul to restore discipline, makes the mistake of raising taxes on grain. The merchants protest, the farmers refuse to sell, and suddenly Cairo erupts in quiet revolt. No armies march, no banners rise, just refusal. Bread disappears from the markets, boats vanish from the river, and the governor's soldiers find their pay delayed by clerical error. Within months, Ahmad Pasha is recalled, disgraced, replaced. The city wins without drawing a sword. You stroll through the Khan al-Khalili bazaar on a soft spring evening. Lanterns glow gold, and the air smells of cinnamon and smoke. A storyteller stands beneath the archway, gathering a crowd. He tells the story of the last Mamluk sultan, though he never says Tumen Bey's name, not directly. There once was a lion who faced the thunder of the north, he begins, and though the thunder broke his bones, his roar still shakes the mountains. The crowd listens in silence, children wide-eyed, old men nodding. No Ottoman guard dares interrupt. Far above, in the citadel, the latest governor writes letters to Istanbul complaining of Egypt's unruly spirit. He doesn't understand that Egypt's spirit doesn't shout, it simply outlasts. The Ottomans take Egypt's wealth and feed it to their empire, gold, grain, scholars, soldiers. Yet, somehow, Cairo still glows richer than any capital. The city lives on trade and learning, on faith and memory. Its minarets pierce the sky like prayers carved in stone. Its people smile with the serenity of those who've seen too much to be impressed by kings. A century passes. Another. The empire around Cairo begins to fray. Wars in Europe, revolts in Persia, debts in the treasury. Istanbul's letters come less often now, its governors weaker, more corrupt. The Mamluk descendants grow bolder. By the late 1700s, they rule again in everything but name. Egypt's real masters, riding through the streets with jewelled scimitars and silk banners, just as their ancestors once did. You can almost feel Tumen Bey's ghost smiling somewhere. His children, though 100 generations removed, have outweighted the empire that hanged him. History has circled back on itself, but even this new age carries shadows. The Mamluk Beys feud among themselves, dividing Cairo into rival camps. Their pride returns, their decadence too. Gold piles up in their palaces while famine creeps across the countryside. The scholars shake their heads. They've forgotten, one laments. When Egypt forgets humility, God sends another conqueror. And far beyond the horizon, that conqueror is already moving. Not from the north this time, but from the west, across the sea, in a land of muskets and reason, where a young general dreams of empire. His name is Napoleon Bonaparte. He's not here yet, of course, but you can almost feel his approach, the faint tremor of a new century, a new invasion, a new fall. Cairo doesn't know it, but the wheel of history is turning again. The night deepens. You stand on the same terrace of the citadel where Selim once looked out over his conquest, where Tumen Bey once prayed for his city. Below, Cairo glows like a constellation. Endless lamps, endless life. The river gleams silver in the moonlight, its waters calm, ancient, waiting. Empires will rise again and fall again, but the Nile will flow, patient and eternal, carrying all their reflections away. The year is 1517 no longer, but centuries have passed as softly as the river moves through its channels. Cairo still stands, layered with time. Ottoman crescents above Mamluk domes, Turkish script beside ancient Arabic calligraphy, the hum of prayer mixing with the creak of merchant carts and the cry of muezzins calling dawn over a city that refuses to age. By the 18th century, Egypt has become both jewel and burden in the Ottoman crown. Istanbul's power has thinned like watered ink, and Cairo's governors act like kings in all but name. The Mamluk Beys, descendants of the warriors Selim once sought to erase, now stride again through the streets in silks and armour, their white horses glittering with gold trappings. The people cheer them, not because they love them, but because they are at least Egyptian in spirit. born of the same soil and sun. You walk through the same alleys where Tumen Bey once fled, and you see his legacy breathing in new faces. The Mamluks of this age are different, not the hardened soldier slaves of old, but aristocrats of luxury and ceremony. Their palaces spill light into the night, their banquets last for days. Yet beneath their splendour, the old arrogance creeps back, the same pride that doomed them centuries earlier. Rival factions fight for control of Cairo's treasures, the Albanians, the Circassians, the Georgians, each with their own banners, their own ambitions. The Ottomans in distant Istanbul watch, weary, unable to restore discipline. Still, for all their vanity, the Mamluks keep the city alive. They rebuild mosques, fund schools, sponsor poets and artisans. Cairo flourishes once more, her streets crowded with traders from India, Sudan and Venice. The Nile's ports hum with voices from 3 continents. If you squint, you could almost believe Egypt is free again. But freedom bought from neglect is never stable. It's the calm before another storm. In the coffee houses, the scholars and merchants talk of strange news from Europe. New machines, new weapons, new men who call themselves philosophers and kings. They measure the heavens, one says, and forget to measure their hearts. But another leans closer and whispers, they build ships that cross seas faster than camels cross deserts. They'll come here, one day the others laugh uneasily. Egypt has seen conquerors before. What difference would a few more make? Beyond the laughter, the Nile keeps its secrets. Its floods still rise and fall, its banks thick with reeds and memory. Farmers pray to God for rain as they always have. The city's rhythm goes on, the scent of bread at dawn, the clang of metal at noon, the lamps flickering in the mosques at dusk. But history has already begun its slow turn toward Cairo again, drawn by the gravity that every empire eventually feels. In 1798, the sea itself delivers the next thunder. From the Mediterranean coast, rumours race ahead of sails. Foreign ships, white and massive, flying banners none have seen before. They anchor off Alexandria, and from them pour soldiers in blue coats, carrying strange weapons that spit fire and smoke faster than muskets. Their leader is young, barely 30, with eyes like polished steel and dreams too vast for the horizon. His name spreads like lightning, Napoleon Bonaparte. He lands not as a pilgrim, nor as a conqueror of faith, but as a messenger of a new age, one that speaks the language of science, reason, and empire. He marches south, cutting through the Mamluk armies like a blade through silk. At the Battle of the Pyramids, the last great cavalry charge of the Old World meets the cold discipline of the New. The French form squares, their cannons thundering, their muskets blazing. Horses crash against them like waves against stone. When the smoke clears, thousands of Mamluks lie dead beneath the gaze of those ancient monuments. It happens so quickly that Cairo barely has time to understand. Within days, the tricolour flag flies over the citadel. The conquerors of Egypt are now conquerors of Europe, and they bring their strange faith in progress with them. You walk through the streets that evening, and everything feels unreal. French soldiers patrol where janissaries once stood. The cafes buzz with new sounds, violins, foreign laughter, words that have no translation. The scholars of Al-Azhar murmur prayers for deliverance. The merchants raise their prices. The city shifts, adapts, endures, as it always does. But under the surface, something profound begins. The Egyptians, long ruled by others, start to see their conquerors not as gods or devils, but as men. Men with power, yes, but also men with flaws. Their technology astonishes, their arrogance disgusts. And somewhere deep in the city's soul, a new idea takes root, that Egypt's fate should belong to Egyptians. It's a thought that grows quietly, like grass pushing through cracks in stone. The French stay for only 3 years, but their shadow lasts for generations. They leave behind maps, printing presses, and an awakening that no empire can erase. The Ottomans return, their authority restored in name, but everyone can see the truth. They are ghosts now, ruling through others, clinging to memory. Egypt is changing, becoming modern, restless, alive again in a way it hasn't been since the Mamluks first fell. As the century turns, a new ruler rises, Muhammad Ali, an Albanian officer sent by the Ottomans who builds an army of Egyptians, rules like a pharaoh and dreams of independence. He'll slaughter the last Mamluks at a banquet in this very citadel. ending their long echo once and for all. But tonight, as you stand on the ramparts above Cairo, the future still feels far away. Below, the city glows as it did in every age, patient, proud, immortal. The Nile whispers against its banks, carrying the reflections of minarets and stars alike. Every empire that has touched this land, the Mamluks, the Ottomans, the French, has believed it conquered Egypt. But if you listen closely, you'll hear the truth murmuring beneath the current. Egypt conquers time itself. The night air over Cairo in the early 1800s tastes of ash and jasmine, the scent of endings and beginnings intertwined. The French have been driven out. The Ottomans have returned in name, but power is shifting once again. You can feel it in the way the soldiers march differently, in the hum of forges by the river, in the sharp new glint in the eyes of those who rule. Egypt, long a prize passed from conqueror to conqueror, is about to crown one of her own, though he comes not from her blood but from her gravity. His name is Muhammad Ali Pasha, an Albanian officer in the Ottoman army, sent to restore order after Napoleon's departure. But the city has a strange way of claiming outsiders. The Nile changes those who drink from it. Within a few short years, Muhammad Ali ceases to act as an agent of Istanbul and begins to dream as pharaohs once did, of empire, of legacy, of Egypt reborn. You see him rise slowly, carefully, with a patience only Egypt itself could have taught. He flatters the Ottoman Sultan, bribes the scholars of Al-Azhar, courts the merchants, listens to the people. He promises peace, justice, and bread. All the things Cairo's exhausted heart longs for, and in return, the city embraces him. But power in Egypt is never given. It is taken quietly, then all at once. The Mamluk beys, who have ruled the countryside since the Ottomans' decline, still strut in their palaces, believing themselves untouchable. They ride through the streets with their peacock banners and jewelled swords, unaware that the new governor is watching every move. In 1811, Muhammad Ali makes his move. He invites the Mamluk leaders to the citadel for a grand celebration, a feast in honour of the Ottoman campaign against Arabia. The city hums with excitement. The beys arrive in splendid procession, silks, armour, and perfumes that fill the air with the scent of roses and pride. They dismount at the same gates where Tumen Bey once prayed for Egypt's deliverance. You stand among the crowd, watching as they vanish through the great doors. Trumpets sound, drums roll, cannons fire, a salute perhaps, or a signal. Then the gates close. Inside the citadel's narrow courtyard, the Mamluks sit at long tables, laughing, toasting, oblivious. At the far end, Muhammad Ali rises from his seat, smiling. He raises a cup in greeting and steps out. The doors at the courtyard's exit slam shut. Soldiers appear on the walls, Albanians, Egyptians, Sudanese, muskets already levelled. For a heartbeat, no one moves. Then the first volley roars. The courtyard erupts in smoke and screams. Horses rear, men fall, tables overturn. The Mamluks scramble for the gate, but there is nowhere to run. Bullets ricochet off marble and flesh alike. The massacre lasts minutes, long enough to end 6 centuries of power. Outside, the city hears the gunfire and freezes. No one knows what is happening until the gates finally open and the smoke spills out, carrying the smell of death. By dusk, Cairo knows. The Mamluks are gone. Their corpses are buried hastily in mass graves. Their palaces are seized, their sons hunted, their names erased. Only a handful escape. Most famously, one man who leaps his horse from the citadel's walls and miraculously survives. The legend spreads. One Mamluk still rides the wind. But the truth is final. The age of the Mamluks, born in glory and ended in blood, is over. Muhammad Ali stands on the same terrace where Selim once watched the city burn. He looks out over Cairo, not with conquest in his eyes, but with calculation. Now, he says quietly, Egypt begins. He means it. Within a decade, he builds schools, factories, shipyards and armies. He sends Egyptian students to Paris, engineers to Italy, doctors to Greece. The printing presses hum, the canals fill, the fields bloom again. The scholars of Al-Azhar bless him in sermons, though they whisper among themselves, he killed kings, but he gives life to a kingdom. And yet, even his power carries echoes of all who came before. The citadel's stones remember Tumen Bey's defiance. The mosques still whisper of Selim's discipline. The people still bow only to God and the Nile. Muhammad Ali is clever enough to know this. He rules Egypt, but Egypt rules him in return. At night he walks the citadel's walls alone, watching the city lights ripple on the river. The wind carries the scent of date palms and smoke. He knows history's rhythm too well, that no ruler lasts forever, that the Nile outlives all ambition. "They think I'm a conqueror," he says once to his secretary, "but I am only a caretaker. The river builds the kingdom, not I." Under his reign, Cairo awakens again, alive, industrial, dreaming of its own rebirth. But even this new dawn cannot erase the shadow that always stretches from the past. Egypt's history doesn't vanish, it folds. The ghosts of Selim, of Tumen Bey, of every ruler who ever swore to own this land still walk beside the river, reflected in its black water like stars in motion. As the 19th century approaches its zenith, you realize the pattern that has written every chapter of this story: conquest, resistance, endurance, renewal, over and over, like the rise and fall of the Nile itself. And through it all, Cairo keeps its strange, eternal calm, as if it knows something every empire forgets, that power is borrowed, but land remembers, that thrones crumble, but faith endures, that time, no matter how fierce, always kneels to memory. The night deepens. The citadel stands silent again, bathed in moonlight. Somewhere below, a muezzin's voice drifts up from the city, soft, steady, ancient. You lean on the cold stone and listen, the words carrying over centuries, over blood, over the endless hum of the river. God is greater. And in that sound, for a moment, every empire that ever claimed Egypt feels smaller than the breeze that moves through the palms. The dawn breaks slowly over Cairo, soft and golden, sliding across domes and rooftops as if the city is being born again for the 1000th time. The citadel gleams in the distance, the same fortress that once echoed with cannon fire and prayers, now quiet beneath the sun. Below, the Nile glitters like a ribbon of glass, its surface carrying both memory and prophecy. Centuries have passed since that terrible morning in 1517, when the first Ottoman cannons turned toward the walls of Rudania. The conquerors, the rebels, the dreamers, all have turned to dust, yet Cairo still stands, humming with life, smelling of bread, smoke, and eternity. The world has changed around it. Steamships on the river, telegraph wires strung across the desert, trains cutting through the plains where once marched the armies of sultans. But the heart of the city beats to the same old rhythm. You wander through its streets and feel the centuries layered beneath your feet. Every stone whispers, "Here, where Tumen Bey rode to battle. There, where Selim's banners first cast their shadows. Beyond that corner, a coffee house named after a Mamluk emir whose name no book records. Even the dust feels sacred, heavy with history's breath. Egypt has seen 100 rulers since that day, each claiming to restore her glory. The Ottomans, then Muhammad Ali and his heirs, then the British, then kings and presidents. Each carved their name across the same sky, certain they had finally mastered her. But none truly did. The city endures all of them the same way the Nile endures floods and droughts, by flowing forward, endlessly, silently, unchanged at its core. You stop by the mosque of Sultan Hassan, its vast courtyard quiet in the morning light. A caretaker sweeps the marble floor. The sound of his broom against stone echoes like a heartbeat. "Strange," he says, noticing your stare. "How everything built here was meant to last forever, and yet only the prayer still does." He smiles faintly. "Empires crumble, but people still whisper God's name." That's enough. Outside, children chase each other through the alleyways, their laughter bouncing off walls older than memory. Pigeons wheel around minarets. A baker calls out the price of bread. Somewhere, an old man recites a verse of the Quran as the sun climbs higher. Life, ordinary, relentless, miraculous, goes on. In the great University of Al-Azhar, scholars still teach from books copied by hands that lived through conquest and rebellion. The same halls that once echoed with fear now hum with new questions. Science, philosophy, the future. Egypt has always turned suffering into wisdom. That is its secret. The world takes, Egypt transforms. You walk to the edge of the river and sit beneath the date palms. The air smells of water and sand. Across the Nile, the city gleams. Minarets, towers, satellite dishes, all pointing upward. The skyline has changed, but its soul has not. This is still the city of faith and defiance, where prophets once walked and conquerors were humbled. You remember the faces that built this story: Selim, grim and relentless; Tumen Bey, proud and doomed; the nameless soldiers who fought, the scholars who prayed, the merchants who rebuilt. None remain, and yet all of them live in the way Cairo moves, slow, dignified, aware of eternity. As evening falls, the call to prayer rises again, carried on a cool wind. The words drift across the river, across centuries, Allahu Akbar. The same call that echoed through the smoke of Ridania, through the silence of Bab Zuwayla, through every dawn since. You close your eyes and listen. The city seems to breathe with the sound. You can almost imagine Tumen Bey's ghost standing again at the citadel, watching over his city. His voice, calm, patient, resolute, murmurs beneath the hum of life. Egypt cannot be conquered. She can only be carried for a time. The wind stirs the palms. The last light of sunset turns the river gold. The citadel fades into silhouette, ancient, eternal, unbroken. And as the night spreads its velvet quiet across the city, you realize that Cairo's story was never one of defeat. It was one of endurance, the triumph of memory over empire, of prayer over pride, of the living over the dead. The stars bloom above the desert, soft and infinite. The Nile glimmers like a mirror of heaven. You breathe in the warm air, heavy with the scent of jasmine and thyme, and understand what every conqueror who ever stood here forgot. That Egypt is not a kingdom to be ruled. It is a heartbeat that keeps the world alive. The breeze cools, the city hums, the river whispers on, and somewhere far below the walls the eternal pulse of Cairo, patient, ancient, undefeated, carries you gently into sharp. The night folds over Cairo like silk. The heat retreats, the noise softens, and the city exhales at last. Lanterns flicker along the river banks, their reflections swaying on the black water like stars at rest. The wind drifts through the palms, carrying the scent of baked earth and jasmine, the same perfume that has lingered here for 1,000 years. You sit by the river and listen, to oars dipping softly, to a dog barking in some far alley, to the slow breathing of the city that never sleeps but never truly wakes. The citadel stands dark against the sky, its stones cool, ancient, peaceful. Once it echoed with war. Now it only holds silence. Cairo hums in her sleep. The prayers fade into murmurs, the markets empty, the Nile murmurs its lullaby beneath the moon. Somewhere a mother sings to her child, "Sleep, my heart." Egypt watches. The words drift through the night like a blessing. You breathe slower. The air feels timeless, heavy with memory but gentle with calm. Empires have risen and vanished here, but tonight there is only stillness, the stillness of a land that remembers everything and forgives almost as much. The stars shimmer above the desert. The river sighs, the city dreams. Sleep now, traveller. The story has come full circle. Egypt still stands. Good night. Sweet dreams.